homework and the board request and everything. Should we put the link to our homework on Trello?
No, that is done. Yeah, you can stop with that.
Yeah.
And also, the calendar week is gone.
It's gone?
Yes.
Who was?
No, I mean before you would have some
okay,
rotation,
yeah.
right? You don't need that anymore. You can just look at GitHub and know what the homework is. And if you're unclear at the end of the class, then ask the teacher what do we need to do next time. You can discuss it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Guys. Okay. Good luck.
Okay, guys. The good news is that the recording finally worked. It's already uploading, so you guys should have a recording of last hour. So I would like to repeat what we've done before the break, before we pick it up again. So we talked about data structures, and we saw 3 examples of how we can store the books. We know that there are no right ways or wrong ways to store your data, but there are definitely more effective ways and less effective ways. So I think a great example that I saw from many of you is storing it in an object, like our books. So we were talking about books, and we talked about how to store the books in an object with nested objects. That's great. The books are coherent together, like the title is always connected to the language, to the author, to the address. But often, very, very often, we will be using arrays to store a collection of information, whether it is books, users, whatever, and you will be working with this so much. So very often we are using arrays, and it is essential that you know your way around with arrays. So everybody has their own methods, and like, for example, before the break, I showed you that I always use object.getOwnProperty names, and then sorry, what was your name again? Nuran gave a great feedback that object.keys is actually also correct there. So and it's fine. So there are 2 ways of doing that. Perhaps object.keys was more applicable there, but you just have to develop your own skill set. So that I ask you, create a web page with all the titles this time, not just the whole books, but only with the titles. That you just have your own quick ways of doing this. That you know how to deal with data structures. So we talked about that. So there are different ways to store that. This is a very common way. You see the ID not as a key, but just as one of the key values of the items. So, and then we left it. We showed how we saw that with for each we can loop over an array of items, and then we get each item. We can do something with it. That's where we left off. And what we're going to do now. So we're going to use that information, that book, and we're going to display it in our DOM. I unfortunately have to leave at 3 o'clock sharp, but don't worry, there will be plenty of fun after 3. So about that part so far, I'm sure that it's not completely clear. Does anybody have a question about the thing so far?
Are you going to explain the arrow function? It goes to the function that is properties already.
Have you guys had arrow functions already, or was it in the home? I think it was in the reading material for this week, right? Okay, so I would invite you to look at that first. Now I'm doubting whether I should keep using it because it looks very shiny and nice, and I think you guys should get familiar with it. So I'll just leave it for now. I'll give you just one more fallback hint. This is the same as saying function book. And when I say the same, I say it works the same now, but there are differences between using a function expression like this, an anonymous function expression, and using an arrow function. There are slight differences, but for this example, it works exactly the same. Okay, these two things is so works the same, but there are differences that you need to know about. Check out the homework. So I'll comment this out for a second. So check out arrow function. So just remember, let's focus on line 24, what this does. We can also, can somebody give me another couple of examples of array methods?
What to do with array?
Array methods.
Have you guys had this already this week? I thought it was in the homework for last week, or is it for next? Surprise? Array methods. Splice. So this is a method, right? It's a function that we can use on an array.
Concat.
Just like we have, sorry?
Concat.
Oops, so concat.
Push.
Let's see what each of these does. What does for each do?
Which
Loops.
over.
Loops and apply.
Okay, what does splice do?
Take apart of array.
Yes.
Yeah, take out part of array, optionally inserting a new part. So
Yeah.
splice is one that is very important to use, but it's not super straightforward. Concat,
Merge two arrays.
merge two arrays, or item and array. Like so, there's like sort of getting. What does this do? Add
Or push items. Alright.
at the end, because then there's also like add at the end. Then maybe there's also one to add at the beginning.
Shift. Unshift, sorry.
Very good. Books dot unshift. And so we with these three we have our or with concat.
Yes, without concat.
Yeah, exactly. So these are three ways to sort of unshift add at beginning. So these are array methods. So that means that like if my variable type is array, I can say my var and then splice push unshift dot. Just the same as object methods are. We already use one. Can somebody give me it's slightly different. It's using the object prototype, but we also have slice, for example. What does that do?
Copy certain part of the array.
Yeah, take a slice. It's like sort of I take a slice, but it. Okay, so these are. You will get like you just need to practice and get familiar with these. Now comes up, like I think with all of these things, the first thing you need to grasp your head around, because you will make this mistake otherwise. It's this. It is there are mutating methods and non-mutating methods. What is a mutating method? A mutating method is, for example, mutating methods are methods that change the original array that you use your method on. So for example, if I say, let's comment this out. I'm going to say console.log books. Can somebody give me, so how could I use, for example, I want to add const new book is. I just copy this. Oh, I really miss my old editor. I don't know how to multi-line editing code. So I want to add on this line. I want to add new book to the books array. How do I do that?
Dot push.
Yeah, books dot push new book. So you can see before it was 2, now we have 3 items. So obviously, so here I print books and here I print books. I'm still referring to the same variable, but so the original variable that I'm using is changed. So there are a couple of these methods, and you can reason about them which ones do and which one don't. There's some ones, so this is an example. So push mutates the original array. Now there's another one that, so let's take for example, console, so I say books.slice, yeah, I can say for example 1. So there are a couple of parameters there, so starting where, and if you don't give another end one, it gives you the rest. And then I say console.log books. So I take a slice off it. So, but if I print one afterwards, the length is still 3, even though, so here I says, so that's so when if you don't understand the difference, you might think, I'm taking a part off, but it's not changing the original array. So I'm going to say slice does not.
The result of the 2 book slices and other variable than you.
Exactly the right answer. So mutate does not mutate the original array. Then why is it useful? And you gave the perfect answer. So I can say you have to, so the non-mutating gives back a new array. So we can say new array is books.slice. And just to sort of make it new array is 2 and books is still the same length. And so here we took book 1 and 2 because we started at index 1 and it continues until for the length that you give it. We don't give it a length and then it becomes until the very end of the array. So I'm inclined to make you all repeat after me, but I will save you that. Just I'm gonna keep repeating it because you will forget this, and then just know, like, and you will find out. Just make the mistake once, and then if your array method is not doing what you're expecting, then ask yourself the question: oh, is this a mutating method or a non-mutating method? So, for example, for each is also not changing the original one, of course. It's just iterating over it and it doesn't touch the original one. But a method that many people use, so there are like these very fancy one, for example, I can say books.map. Have you guys used that before? No? So map, so we can go to ndn map. So map, the map object holds any, that's not very helpful. Oh, no, sorry, I meant the wrong one. I need to be a dot map, array.map. So the map method creates a new array with the result of calling a provided function on every element on the calling array. So what that does is, so we already saw for each, and then we can here function by function element. We can say for each, we can say my function. We don't call it, and that's the important part. Like you shouldn't make that mistake. If I call this while writing my code here, then for each we'll try to execute the return value of my function. So I just give it my function like this, and it will execute it for me. So high element, so it does that. So similarly, so if I say what happens if const x is books undefined, so it doesn't return anything, and it doesn't change the books because books is also the same. We already saw slice and push, but we also already saw push. But for example, if we use map, so map is similar to for each, but the function that you use for map needs to return a new element. and then what gets returned from map. So this is easier to see with another example. I'm just going to delete this for 1 second. I'm going to say const num is 1, 2, 3, 4. Const squares is nums dot map, and then we can say, so here we can say square function, and so then we have to define square function. So we say element,
Yes.
so we get each element of the array, and we say element times elements. And now comes the important part between for each and map. For each just calls another function and sort of wanders off doing other things. But the map, and it's a very useful function, we return this. Squares. So, and now I can also do nums. So you see that nums is still the same. So the dot map function, it does something on each element of the array, but it doesn't modify your original array. It's going to return a new array, and you need to catch that in a new variable. So in other words, mutating functions, you can just keep using the original array. With non-mutating methods like map, reduce, for each, which other ones that we see, slice, you need to catch the result by putting a const blah blah for it. Is that clear?
So we can use map instead of old loops, for example, for, because it's useful and it's short.
It's super short. That's a great reason to use it. And you could use map if you after you loop over it, if you still want to have an array. For example, if you want to, this is a great example, like if you afterwards you still want an array, if you just want to, for example, what we want to work towards now is showing this in the DOM, then we don't really need a new array because we don't care about the array anymore. We want to start doing things in the HTML. So that's why I'm going back to what we just had. So if you need a new array, then you use map. If you don't need a new array, you just want to iterate over it quickly, then you can use for each. And that's why here, so I don't need to catch it because for each is never going to give anything back. It's just going to do the exact same as the for loop that we've been writing. For I is blah, 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 blah. This is on your homework. It's you can read back, but again, I'm going to just repeat it until you get so tired of it. Mutating arrays and non-mutating arrays. Okay, and if you think, why the fuck is my array not being modified, or why is something not being given back? That's because you need to think about, okay, if it's mutating, then I can keep using the original array. If it's non-mutating, then I need to catch the return value of that method in a new variable. Capiche? Okay. Back to where we were. I see that sort of, is it confused or just tiredness?
Both of them.
Both of them? I'm just wondering now, is it useful to go to a next step if this is still unclear? Because then I have the idea that by the end of this class you guys will be under the table. What's up?
Can you explain now what is the difference between a function and a raw function that you started to describe it, but you didn't finish, and how to use a raw function properly?
So I can, but it's also at your own risk, because it is also not super easy to explain, because with arrow functions I have to explain another difficult topic that I think you guys haven't had yet, which is lexical scope. How can I? So I'll try to keep it simple. So of course the biggest difference between having an arrow function and a normal function is that an arrow function is slightly shorter to the right. And you think, well, is those couple of words function really that much of a difference? Well, there are contexts, for example, like this, that this reads much more easy than having function there. It becomes even more apparent with map. Okay, so let me just give you the syntax. Function, I am a function. Do something. This is what we all know, right? There are other ways we can do this. We can say const I contain function is function like this. So this variable has as value an anonymous function. So this is a function declaration. This is a function expression caught in a variable. So we cannot ever say, so arrow functions are always anonymous. So we always have to either catch them. I contain an arrow function is, so this is a syntax for that. So an arrow function can never have a name. It's always anonymous. So we cannot say my function, this doesn't exist. It's always anonymous. So in this case, this is super short. So there's another, so I will explain one more thing about it. And that is, it's important to know that if you can just open brackets like you would normally do with a function. But there's a nice shorthand for arrow functions, which is if you don't give the brackets, then it automatically exactly uses return. So let me use return. These two things are exactly the same. So if you don't use the braces, it automatically returns this. That can be a bit difficult. There's one trick that took me like a bit to understand, because arrow functions are very recent. Like when I started programming, they only became sort of universally accepted like a year ago or something. That if you want to return an object, that's going to be difficult, because now like we have the brackets that you normally use for a function, like to have the function brackets, and you have the brackets to declare an object. So if, for example, if you here want to return a book with a title, that will break, because it thinks this is a function bracket and not your object bracket. So just as a quick trick, put parentheses around that. Oh, oops. And now it's no longer confused. Once you start working with this, you'll figure this out. So, but this shorthand that it automatically returns something makes it even more readable. If, for example, I want to say books.map. Let's say I want to say const book titles is books.map book return book.title. And now I do console.log book titles. So it makes a new array based on what the return value of this function is. So again, just to repeat it one more time, this is the same as saying this. If you don't return anything, so with a normal function, we would have to do it like this. Function book, return book. So this is the same as this. So you can see how the arrow function becomes extremely useful. Oh. It does the exact same thing. Now, so this is sort of just a syntax of arrow functions, but there's one important thing that in general you won't come across a lot, but you always have to be aware of it. And this is where it becomes, like, I will not explain it too much, but it has to do something with this. If I have title, some title. So if I have some prop, some method, if I say function, console log this. So please, for like I'm explaining it, I just want to like show you once, but you don't have to remember this. So sort of, please don't start looking even more confused at me after this. I'm afraid you will. X dot some method. Oh, what am I doing? Why is this? I would expect this guy to go to the window. Oh yeah. This is not. Do you know what I'm missing? I would expect. Why is this not? Oh yeah. Oh sorry. Yeah. No, it is working. I'm just. Yeah. Sorry. No, it's working. I'm just reading it wrong. Okay. So so this is the like a difference. I'm writing two functions and they're both just console logging this. You probably haven't used this. It's very useful and you're going to be using it a lot in the future, but I'm not going to explain it now because it's a very complex topic. Just this creates a new lexical scope, this function, and it adheres to the object that it's in, either by and this doesn't. So this still refers to the global context. You guys maybe don't know, but something with lexical scope. So if you're working with this, you might find out that it's not doing as you expected. But for our work today, we don't have to consider this. Okay, but at least I've explained. So I'm sure that clarified everything.
Is it possible to ask a question which is in Dutch with our homework?
Yeah, we can. If there's no questions, then I will continue to the DOM part, like the part that we now need to pick up. But maybe what is your question?
How to make that node will understand that inside object, for example, have some value. For example, how to write if object or array inside of node is undefined or have some value, return something.
So
or remove this node or to do something with node.
By node you mean an array node, like an element in a node, or you mean node that programming language.
When we're creating a DOM element,
Yeah,
so it's a node, right?
yeah.
And how to make that this node will understand what going with objects inside of this node.
So to see if there is something inside a node, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, for example, in our homework,
Mm-hmm.
we had a variable list of books,
Mm-hmm.
and we made some object, for example, paragraph or heading,
Mm-hmm.
and for example, we have a broken variable like this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we don't have last image SRK,
Mm-hmm.
and we say to it if it's undefined, so remove node
Completely.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So what happens if it doesn't have an image? How do we remove the whole HTML node? Is that your yeah? Okay, then I think it's more useful if I answer this if we have an HTML thing going on. So I'm going to first make that step, and then I think I can answer your question. Because I think it's something similar that what they had is maybe you.
Yeah, I just tried to specify it before. We had this. We broke our header with this thing.
Yeah.
So because you can check your value, your variable, if it's undefined or
Yeah.
it's have some value, but how the node can understand what is going inside
Yeah.
the value.
So I think we can come. I'm going to come back on it, and like in a couple of minutes. But I think the answer to your question in short, to sort of give a sort of quick peek, I think that maybe before even rendering the whole node, you already do the check. Instead of first printing the node and then you start filling it up, and then once you find out that the image is missing, you go back and remove the node. So maybe there's before you even start printing the node, remove it. But let's all together. Let's first make a HTML. Let's print HTML. So okay, so we have our function that gets a book. How do I get this into my HTML page?
How to make a div?
First, we make a div in HTML. And then,
And we code also.
Give it ID.
okay, why do we give it an ID? Why do we give it an ID?
To take this ID inside the function.
He means to
Yeah.
access.
Yeah.
To access.
Yeah, no, I mean I know what it means. I just want to ask. My books ID. So now we can use it in JavaScript. So we give it this one so that we can use it later. So what's the next step?
Go to JavaScript. And we make a variable. Then we document get element by ID.
So I'm going to say const books div is document get element by ID.
And the ID.
What do we give it? My books ID. No, so I already think I'm not quite liking this because I don't want to get the whole books div. So I want to say, I'm going to say function print books. Books. I'm going to say print books. Book. So then I want to say one time for all books, just get that div. And I'm going to say something like this. So we have the get that element. What next?
Start building our H2.
How do we do that?
Start building the H1.
Yeah.
Also make a variable.
We start making an H1.
Yeah.
For making what?
Make a variable and create element.
Yeah.
And then we put just H1 inside the.
Okay, so I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to do it like this. Oops. No, that's just going to confuse. Sorry, I'm just figuring out how can I print this the most simple. I'm just going to put it in the global scope so these both can use it. Otherwise, I have to pass it. So, print. So we say document.create element. What sort of element did you want to create?
H1, but we have to make a variable.
Title.
Yeah.
But we have to create UL maybe first,
Yeah, why do we have to create a UL first?
so we can order the books in LI.
Okay, we can do that.
But I actually do this. So we cannot do this H1 before UL
We can.
because it's working.
Yeah, I mean, we can. It's sort of like a matter of like how legible, like how readable is it. Maybe it's also for the reader of the code most useful if we first say UL, because we can now first make an H1 and then, well, the UL makes sense to make it even before. For now, I'm going to choose not to make a UL. I'm going to make a li. Just a div. Like I'm going to list it as a div thing. So I'm going to say const book container is document.create element by ID div.
Create element.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Create element. And then I'm going to create it. I'm going to title l.inner HTML.
H1 should be string also.
Oh yeah, thanks. Inner HTML is book.title. And then I'm going to say book container dot. So I want to put the H1 into I want to now put this one. Child. Title L. Oh, title L. And then.
And then we have to append also div within parent div.
So there's a book container and a books container. That's it. I'll just make it a little bit more explicit so we don't get confused. Books list container, append child, book container.
But H1 is too big. And since
Oh,
have too many
yes.
titles, I think H1 is not.
H2, we have to use H2.
Yeah?
We cannot use double H1 in same div, so H2 is better. And we
But it's not in the same div, right? But it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah,
H1, H2, H3.
can style it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can get it. I see a loop before in books. It's a loop. Yeah, because it's for each. But I can see why you made the inner HTML book title. How is it connected? I don't see.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, maybe, so I think it might be a little bit more clear if I have one more time, just do it with a normal loop. I think. Is that do you think?
Just in inner HTML, I don't see a reference for a function with a loop.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So what's happening is that I'll do it again like this. The books.length I plus plus. So what is to make this the same as there? I'm going to say print HTML for book books I. So this is the same, right? So it's books.
Let's change the name of the books.
Oh wait, so this needs to be
Book data or something.
in here. Oops. So this is the same. So what happens is this is a function. Print HTML for book is a function that I'm calling for each book. So I iterate over the books array, and every time I find a new book, I call a function and I give that function that book. So if I say here console log book,
No, sorry, it says.
Oop. Thanks. So it's going to say console log I. Maybe that helps a little bit in sort of the, so first loop, I is 0. It's going to execute, it's going to call this function with as a first argument books I. So I is 0, so books 0 is the first element. So this function is then being executed with I am executed, and this book now has a value of this whole object. Then the next step is I'm going to just create my DOM elements, and I'm going to give it this. So this time, so the first time this HTML is going to be executed, I'm going to say console.log. This time my the title is book.title. This time it's title 0, the next time it's title 1. So then I fill title element inner HTML as book title. Then the next time I'm going to append the title into the div, and then I'm going to add that div to the bigger div. That's like the container. So what is the result? Oh, no, nothing, but we can say inspect. We can look inside this. So this is the book, this thing, right? The main container, and it's called here the books list container document get element by ID my books ID, and then JavaScript is going to fill it with another div. And we can also say book container set attribute ID book.book ID.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So now we run it again, and now it has an ID book 0.
Book 1.
Did I come close to answering your question, or did I? Yeah.
Can I answer your question?
Oh, okay, 1. Yeah.
Okay. In line 32, can we use instead of title dot in HTML create text node and append some text? We can use book.title instead of string, and child append child to h2 tag. It's same result.
With
right?
create text node.
Yes.
Yeah, we can create a text node inside the H2.
Inside
H2,
yes, yes, yes.
it's the same thing.
Same
but
thing,
it's
yeah.
same. We can also there are.
Yeah.
But this is
I used twice.
Yeah, cool.
Well, just for to know.
Works.
Yes.
So what is not checking?
Sorry.
So
Oh, yeah.
what is not checking?
So the question, your question. Thank you for reminding me of your question. So, what if? So now your question, if I understand correctly, the name for that is conditional rendering. So to render means sort of to display it, and conditional means only render it if a certain condition is met. So how can we do that? we can say, for example, let's add a year 2010. So I know that you had an example of undefined. Like, what if there's an undefined value? That's a very good one. So last time I was here, we talked about conditions. So maybe if it's undefined or if it's something you don't want to expect. But I'll give another example to sort of make this condition. I can say 1990 and 2018. So let's also say date L is document create element by, we say h6, and we say date L dot inner HTML is book.year, and then we say date L. Okay, so we're also displaying this. So now, as a term of conditional rendering, I want to ask the question, can you only print nodes, print books, so print HTML objects, if they meet a certain condition? And that condition in your example was if it's undefined. We can also do an example with that. But a fun other example would be, I want to only show the books that were published before 2000 or something.
So for instance, we can make it easily that instead of undefined, it will show empty.
Empty, we can do everything. We can do empty, we can make it red, we can do sort of like, but let's first see if we can do it.
It will have an element still, empty element, and the thing is to remove element completely if it's not exist.
Yeah, so I think I wanna so in our code we can. So your question is, I want to remove the node completely if some condition is met. My suggestion will be, instead of first printing it, then checking, and then removing, why don't we just prevent it from being printed in the first place? So we could say just like if book.year is greater than or smaller than 2000. So we can either put all of this in an if statement, or also in a very nice way is just to say return. And it just stops all further execution. Or, in your example, if this is null, if image.source, what is it? Image source is equal to null. Same thing, but let's just switch these two around. Sorry, I need to go. So now we can see I save, and it was a very subtle change, but
It's removed whole element, but just a part of element, image circle.
Same thing. We can also do this. Say if, so for example, if it's before same condition, we do this. So now it's going to print all of them, but only if this condition is met. Show. Or we can also say the other way around. Or we can also do something else entirely again. We can say book container dot set attribute class. Oh no, set. Oh shit. Yeah. Again, this is stuff I usually don't do in my work. What's the sort of? Can I just set attribute? Yeah, probably. Blue or bad book is equal to null bad book, and then on my style I can say how do I do this? Lingual is style sheet source. Is it source?
SRC. Yes.
or href. Alright.
You can use
Href is style.css. Does that work? Okay, and I can say class bad book. So the answer is maybe take a step back, because of course we can just first do this, and then but once it's in your HTML, it becomes like a big pain to go back to your JavaScript logic, because then what you can also do is write another function that says check HTML nodes and say document dot get elements by class name or something books if cons elements if elements like it become like you can rework and then later on change it, but it's better. Yeah. See?
The last one, it would be if it's equal to no, then.
Yeah, so you can just sort of keep first do your conditions and then render, and rather than first going into the HTML and then saying, oh, do I need to change any nodes? It's better to do it that way. I really got to run. Sorry. There's. Can you take it over? Do you have one of these?
No, but I want to ask Martin.
Ja. Heb jij dit?